Hello and welcome to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Today we have Missouri primary victor on the Democratic side, Cori Bush, soon to become the next Congresswoman from Missouri, the first ever Black woman to be a Congresswoman from Missouri. She ran in 2018. You may have seen Knock Down the House, the incredible documentary which details all these amazing women running for office in 2018, AOC, Paula Jean Swearengin, Cori Bush, and others. She lost in 2018. She got 30% of the vote. She was running against a 50-year Democratic dynasty, the Clay family. And in 2020, she wins. She has just won. It's a very progressive district, so all likelihood is that she will be the next Congresswoman from that district. And this is a person who has overcome enormous adversity, formerly unhoused, had COVID-19 while running this campaign, a registered nurse, an ordained pastor, a leader in the Ferguson uprising, always on the front lines with a bullhorn and a megaphone in her hand. So to a Black Lives Matter activist from the place that Black Lives Matter originated, Ferguson, Missouri, elected almost 6 years to the day from Michael Brown's death. And this is an extraordinary person who has an incredible inner strength and an enormous brilliance. So we're so lucky to have her on the program today. And it's representative of this wave of progressives fighting the Democratic establishment, representative of that moment of AOC's victory in 2018, of Jamal Bowman here in 2020, and Mondaire Jones, and so many others. People who stand up for Medicare for all, people who stand up for the Green New Deal, people who stand up against police brutality, people who've been on the front lines, who have lived experience that teach them things that folks who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, who often become our legislators from the ruling class, from the upper class, don't have this type of knowledge and understanding what the United States truly is. And Cori Bush is a person who does. And that is who should be representing us. So we have her on the program today. And it's an extraordinary moment to celebrate progressive values and our resiliency and our steadfast commitment to the politics of the people and the political revolution. So it's an enormous thing to have her on. And we've talked so much about this program, about the path from activism to politics. Cori Bush has said she never even wanted to be an activist. She was a nurse. She was showing up on the front lines of the protests in Ferguson, and then said, we didn't get justice, so we kept showing up again. It kept showing up again. It kept showing up again. And that's what this is about. It's show up, show up, show up, show up. And now, as she says, from unhoused to the house, a remarkable victory. So it's a great honor to have on Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal, Cori Bush, Black Lives Matter activist, leader of the Ferguson uprising, registered nurse, ordained pastor, formerly unhoused person, defeating a 50-year dynasty in Missouri for Congress. First of all, thank you so much. The last time I saw you, I don't know if you noticed, was we were at that Bernie Sanders rally in New York City. An incredibly hopeful moment right there. And right now is a little bit of a rough patch for us progressives in a lot of ways, but your victory, a huge, huge moment of inspiration. Talk about, and of just success. Talk about what this incredible upset victory means right now.
It means so many things to so many different people. It means that regular, everyday people, are getting recognition, as being able to lead. It's that, regular, everyday people feel like they have a voice. It's Black women can actually lead. We're more than just a voting bloc. We can lead, and we can lead in Congress. It is, that we don't have to be people who are bossed by big corporations and big donors, lobbyists. It can be people who don't accept corporate money like me, people who care about the environment, people who care about, mass incarceration and, people having a living wage and, families belonging, and being together and, that Black Lives Matter and, all of these things and where we can stand up and be loud and proud about it. And that we're fighting for these issues and advocating for healthcare for every person. And, it means that, that there's dignity in the quality of life, that we're seeking, and it can come to fruition when you have people who are willing to, who not only bring, do we want to have legislation? Yes, but having that lived experience to be able to, to inform legislation is powerful.
So we've talked a lot on this program with a lot of folks who've made the jump from activist to candidate to legislator, all across the spectrum, from New York to all across the country to California. Talk about, you said, I did not intend, or I was not trying to become an activist. You were a nurse on the front lines of that uprising in Ferguson.
Yes.
Talk about that path from activism, from nurse to activist to politics, now to a real leader of the progressive movement.
So my father's been in politics for most of my life, more than 30 years. And I said I would never do politics. Like, I used those words several times. I will never, like, that was like a mantra. I will
Don't make
never
me do it.
But it was just, I saw someone with such a good heart that was actually doing great work in the community. I saw so many darts come his way. I saw him go through so many things just trying to help people. And so I was like, why would I want to volunteer to do this? And it wasn't like he was getting money for it. Wasn't helping put food on our tables, I felt. So, why are you doing this, Dad? But it wasn't. So I went into ministry. That's where I felt like I could help people. Started working with our unhoused population, working in human trafficking, trying to save lives that way. And then also I was a nurse. And so that's how I was saving lives and directly affecting the community through those efforts and through that career. But when Michael Brown was murdered, I felt like, okay, I'm a nurse. I can go out to the streets and be a medic. I'm clergy. I can go out and pray with people, and so that's what I did. But it was just that I ended up staying, because when I'm out there in my own community and I'm seeing something that I just never thought I would see in my own community before, I just would have never thought that it's like civil rights footage, but it was happening in my time. And so we continued. I just continued on, and I wanted to see justice. But every day, like today, will we get justice?
You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Cori Bush. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Cori Bush. Every day you're waiting for justice. That's where you left off.
Every day, yes, every day waiting for justice, and justice didn't happen. So we would go out again the next day, and then there's no activist guru person that anoints you and says, okay, you've been out 83 days, so now you're an activist. Like, that doesn't happen. And so I wasn't trying to do it. It's just I had to come back. I had this insatiable desire to see justice that didn't come.
Well, the community protested for 400 days in Ferguson.
Yes.
And that's where the origination of the statement Black Lives Matter comes from. You must feel, talk about what it feels like right now to see this entire nation erupt in protest. It was such a long-standing effort. I mean, it's something that I haven't seen in my lifetime. From coast to coast, people in the streets with such a sustained effort. Talk about what this feels like. And I think also, on the heels of these protests, or in the midst of these protests, people like yourself, Jamal Bauman, Mondaire Jones, being elected, and all the squad re-winning their elections at this moment. Talk about the feeling of that arc for you as a person who witnessed that and participated in that from some of that origin of that.
Yeah, the moral arc of the universe is bending towards justice. Hopefully, is what that means. But it's like we fought so hard and we believed so deeply. That's why we kept showing up. We felt like our voices, the voices of people who were not connected the day before August the 9th, you know, unemployed people, doctors, nurses, educators, you know, retirees, just students, you know, that we could make change if we stayed diligent and persistent and kept a clear message. But people, the way people antagonized us, and you know, they called us terrorists and black extremity, you know, a couple of years later, that's what we were called, you know, that whole thing. You know, it started to feel like we were beating our heads against the wall, you know, because you had some help, but then you had so many people that just felt like you didn't know what you were talking about, like you were just there to cause trouble. And then 2017, we kind of went through that, but now seeing so many people, it's kind of like the wrong word. So it's not really vindication, but it's just like, I told you, like we've been saying this for so long, but understanding that leaders lead from the front and they do things that are unpopular and they push them and to make them popular. So that brings the awareness and the visibility. So understanding our place, you know, but like it's now we see all of these corporations and businesses, big and small, that are saying Black Lives Matter. We see, you know, major, you know, sports teams and organizations saying Black Lives Matter, and where I think before some of them were people were being penalized for standing up. And so, well, we know they were. But now seeing this, it's like, okay, now we can get somewhere. We have the visibility, we have the awareness, but who is in those seats of power that can help push legislation? Because we can do this side, we can do the protest side and the visibility side, but it goes nowhere if we don't have people in seats that are willing to use the pen that they have to go ahead and create this legislation and push it through, and having a president that will sign it into law. So that's what we're working on now.
Well, one of the most profound things that I felt that you said in the documentary, the Netflix documentary, Knock Down the House, was people are waking up to see that the problems that we have are problems that we ourselves can fix. And I found that so profound, because so often we think about power as external. Power is something far away. Power is something the oppressors are coming from far away. Talk about, because this seems very clear to me, right? When we were in those protests just in New York City, in Brooklyn, like, you know, last week, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, it strikes me as completely confusing that there is no mechanism for our government to address protests directly. But yet we have the power to fix these problems ourselves. Talk about this notion. Expand on this.
So it was just regular folks coming together that beat the pavement for more than 400 days, and legislation happened all across our country. Change happened. That ripple effect of that change has continued on even 6 years later, not just in the United States, but even around the world. And so that is one. So we were able to make that change by staying. We had that stick and stay. But then also we decided to not only stop with that. So we started working, and we have a group that went into search and rescue, making sure that missing girls, because we have a big problem with missing girls, especially Black girls in our community, and in other places. So search and rescue. Another group that I'm with, we started working with the unhoused population. Another group started with, so many different groups, you know, we've started so many other things, just trying to fix these issues ourselves, working on stopping the violence, for the communal violence and gun violence in our areas. You know, we did that. We started to do that work, and then putting that pressure on people that are in power. There is a group locally here in St. Louis. They put together a whole campaign, close the workhouse. Ben and Jerry helped with that. You know, gave that visibility. You know, closing the workhouse, a medium security institution that was the conditions were just reprehensible. And you know what? 2.5 years, these activists pushed, and we got it closed over the last month and a half. That is the work that we can do ourselves.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the police, defunding the police, the militarization of the police. People often misunderstand what this idea of defund the police means.
Totally.
Clarify this and talk about this from your perspective.
for me, it's a reallocation of funds. It's not saying that the police won't be funded. It's not saying that they won't, have a salary, that they have to volunteer. It's saying that that there are areas in our community that are underfunded while the police are able to buy tear gas and MRAPs and, bear mace and rubber bullets and stockpile SWAT gear. Well, we don't need that. What we need is money in our social programs. What we need is a safe and adequate housing for our unhoused population. What we need is more resources for our community, our health department. When we think about, even in my community, when COVID-19 hit, we already had issues with people not having access to healthcare, or having the access but not the money to pay for the healthcare. But when you add COVID-19 to it, it really hit people hard. We didn't even have, it took a long time for certain parts of the St. Louis area to get COVID-19 testing supplies. Of course, those were the majority Black communities. Those were communities that are more disenfranchised. And so if we put more money into those areas, put more money into social programs, put money into mental health, instead of having our police officers be social workers and being, in our schools as SROs and all of that, like, we don't need that. Put therapists in our schools, put counselors and wraparound services in our schools. So that's what we're talking about.
I want to just ask a slightly bit of a personal question, because you have faced down so much adversity in this journey. You're unhoused. You had COVID-19. You've been assaulted by the police. You talked about domestic violence on Democracy Now! When we think about climate change and we think about what's coming, the idea of resilience is so important. We all are going to have some kind of internal resilience to deal with what's coming our way. Talk a bit about what gives you strength. Where does that incredible resilience and strength come from? And what do you pull on? What do you draw
on? When I think about a lot of the things that I started to experience, the very first thing that kind of knocked me off my square, I was 14 years old, and it was basically an administrator saying that I cheated on an entrance exam because I was the #1 student walking into a basically all white school. And they didn't believe that I could do that. And so they called me a cheater and made me retest, and I did even better. But I took a lot of, right, exactly. But I took a lot of harassment, and there was a lot of intimidation that came out of that. And so it put me on, and I went into this spiral, and my life went a whole different direction. And, but there was someone later on that helped me. And I remember that had this person not spoken into me and helped me and believed that I could have a different life, if that person would not have done that and taken that time, I would not even be alive today. And so I give that back, and so I remember that, and just remembering the mission that I have, the mission that I know is in my heart, is to love people, because that's what was given to me. There was this love that didn't have to be extended to me. And so for me, I'm giving that back, because that's why I'm still here. I don't deserve to be here. Like, I didn't do something great that says that I need to be on this planet. Somebody spoke up and stood up for me. And so I'm still here. And so because of that, they didn't take me out. Every time the bullets came at me or whatever it was, they didn't get to take me out. So because of that, I'm still here, and I'm okay with being vulnerable enough to make sure that other people don't end up in those spots. So because I love you, I care that the police don't murder you or your family member. Because I love you, I don't want you to be unhoused or in unsafe housing. So I'm going to work for you. Because I love you, I care that you have a quality of life, and that you have decent wages where you can take care of yourself and your family and have something left over to save, because so that's where it comes from. And so even in those times when I'm feeling, discouraged or whatever, when I think about, if I stop, could somebody die? If I stop, how will somebody hurt? And so I pick up and keep going, because someone did it for me.
You're tuned in to Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Cori Bush. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Cori Bush. And you had COVID-19 during the campaign, uninsured, and you still won. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, It's a remarkable achievement. Most people have COVID-19; they don't get back out of bed. I mean, that's it's a serious disease. Talk about the experience of all this coming at you during the campaign.
Yeah, it was rough, but I think I had a little bit of boot camp with my 2018 run, because in 2018, like 2.5 months before my race, I had the car accident, and so I was off my feet for about 6 weeks, and I stayed in the race. I was unsuccessful, and so this time around, when COVID-19 hit, I had all the symptoms of it, even though my test came back negative. I was sick for 2 months, 2 full months, barely getting out of the bed, barely could walk to the bathroom, breathing, just every moment feeling like it could be my last, because my breathing was so shallow, and it was just really, it was terrifying. And it's still, let me just say, it's still terrifying, because if there's a moment where I start to feel like, wait a minute, my breathing is a little off, I'm thinking in my head, like, oh my gosh, is this coming back? So it's still terrifying, but I have an incredible team, and my team kept going. They didn't, it was just like, okay, Corey's on a break and they kept moving, they didn't stop. And so that's what we needed in that moment, was people that understood that the mission of this is greater than one person. Like with Senator Sanders, it was about a movement and not one person. So you can take out the head, but you can't take out the movement.
Well, AOC, while addressing the DNC, the Democratic Convention, she said, "I have fidelity and gratitude towards the movement." And it was amazing, because it was almost as if she was saying her allegiance was to the movement over the party, and that it was a remarkably bold and brave, and the mainstream media, of course, attacked her for it. You voted against the Democratic platform. I was on the platform committee in 2016. I know what this is about. Talk about why you voted against it, and talk about why it's so important that the movement also challenges this establishment.
Yeah, I had to vote against it. If I say that I'm about saving lives, I went to nursing school and did all of my training successfully, but I don't remember a class. As a matter of fact, there was not a class that was Let Them Die 201. There was no class on how to let people die. There were classes on how to provide quality care to anyone that comes to you as a patient. And so that's what I have to do. And so as a nurse, I cannot just sit back and allow 60,000 people a year to die because we're fighting over legislation, or people don't understand, how do I get to pick and choose who dies and who lives? So who's going to show me that? I want those legislators that feel that that Medicare for all is too much, that we need to have health care for some people. I want them to come to St. Louis, come to this area, and point out the people that should not have health care. You show me that. Because until you can show me that, I'm not fighting. Like, you show me that, you stand up and be that bold. Because otherwise, I'm going to be this bold and say all of my folks deserve health care.
And
so
right
that's
now,
why I voted against it.
Well, and also you have said you do support Biden and Kamala Harris in this election. Obviously, Donald Trump. Can you talk a little bit about the nuance there? Because I feel like there's a cynicism within the Democratic Party that says, "Oh, we don't want to give people too much because we don't want to upset the cart too much." And then there's a cynicism within the Republican Party that says people are dumb, so we're going to manipulate them into being racist and all these things that they are. And I think that what you represent, and I think what Bernie Sanders represents, and the progressives represent, is this other politics of no cynicism, of respecting people, of believing in people. How do we at this moment recognize this? I feel what is incredible cynicism and aiming for so little or such great manipulation on behalf of the Republicans with this moment where progressives are triumphing in so many of these places. How do you do this internally?
Say what you mean and mean what you say. Because if you're going to open your mouth, I feel like we have to be accountable for every word. So if you can say it, you can do it. Otherwise, don't say it. So, yes, I'm going to stand up to make sure that Donald Trump is not elected again. But I'm also not going to just fall down like a stack of cards that was blown down. I'm not going to do that, because people's lives are in the balance. And so you're going to get all of this. So St. Louis has put up with me for the last 6 years on every bullhorn, microphone, television station. They have put up with me on the corners, wherever, and they still said, you know what, that's the one that we want we want her to represent us from our elders all the way down to our 18-year-olds. They said this is the one. And so I have to continue that same voice for them in Congress. And so I'm not going to allow myself to be bullied into or manipulated or pushed into or even, tossed a few crumbs to make me change, who I am. It didn't happen during Ferguson when folks tried to toss crumbs. It won't happen now. And the thing is, if we don't speak up, if we're not clear about what we want, then they can just continue to not give us what we need. So I'm going to speak up about it. But do I understand that there are processes and that sometimes there has to be compromise in areas? Yes, I get that. But there are other areas where we can't. And if I allow them to shut me up and tell me what I cannot have or what won't happen, or you need to be quiet, go along to get along, if I allow that from the beginning, then that's how I will be in the end. And I can't, St. Louis is not sending me to Congress for that.
The rules of the economy have always been stacked against poor people, black people, brown people. And it's always been unfair and racist and deadly. But I feel with Stephen Mnuchin saying, we're not going to shut the economy back down again, that this pandemic has added another level of that type of lethal racism, because we know who's dying from COVID. We know who's getting COVID, right? And they're saying, even though Robert Reich and many other experts in the economy have said, we have to shut down the economy, we have to give people assistance, it feels as much like the Republicans are actually using the pandemic in a way. Can you talk about the inherent racism in this drive to reopen the economy that we are seeing right now?
A big percentage of the essential workers, Black and brown people, and Black and brown people are the ones that are a big percentage of those that have the cases, many of the ones that died. And to say, I remember when people were, trying to take down Capitol buildings, in their states and showing up, armed, and, something that I know that if I showed up to the Lord, but to say that I need my hair cut, this is the reason why we need to open back up our estate, because I need a haircut. We need to open, not that, even though Black and brown people in my community are dying at large numbers, I need a haircut, or I need to be able to go to this store. I don't want to wait in line. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to, even though. And so the fact that is also being perpetuated, coming by some of these lawmakers, that are also trying to be buddy with a president that shouldn't be. I think that it says a lot, because he's not shutting it down. We have to pay attention to that. He never shut it down. He even propped up those legislators, those governors that were allowing it. Let that be a Black Lives Matter protest where we run into the Capitol building with big guns, and shouting at the police. What would happen? It would be I don't even want to imagine what will happen, but we're seeing it right there. That's why our work has to be in making sure people understand why Trump has to go, because it's not just Trump that we take out. When Trump goes, his administration goes. When his administration goes, all of those governors and other legislators, they lose part of their power. They lose what has them in this place of feeling entitled right now. So we have to take him out to get the rest of them out. I think about my own governor. We cannot have somebody being buddy to Donald Trump when you know that you have Black and brown people, you have Asian people in your state, and you have disabled people in your state, and you continue to allow this man to rip and hurt that community. We have to get him out.
Last question, I know, because you have so many things on your incredible agenda. You've been standing up and speaking out about COVID-19 within prisons. And the carceral state is one of the legacies of white supremacy. And we see that right now. We see so many of these protests talking about this. Talk about COVID-19 in prisons. And then I'm afraid we have to let you go because you have many other important things to do.
Yeah. Well, we don't already the state of some prisons as it relates to medical services is already there. It just isn't where it needs to be in the first place. Just when we talk about medical services in prisons, and I know because I've worked with nurses whose part-time job, or their other full-time job was working in prisons, always being understaffed, just so many issues within the prison. And so when we talk about that, we talk about what the regular issues in prisons of overcrowding, of the conditions being deplorable, so the conditions already weren't great, or even good. The conditions were bad. And then on top of that, put COVID-19, we are in, to feel like we should continue to house people in these conditions so closely together and not giving them the opportunity to be able to really social distance because of the situations of the prison. You're actually killing people, and it can't be okay to put their lives on the line simply because they're in prison. That's not that's not a reason. We have to save lives regardless of who we're talking about. I'm not for the death penalty, and that's what that is. When you keep people locked up in these prisons, that is like a death sentence for people who, don't deserve that. That's not their sentence, so we need to depopulate these prisons.
Cora Bush, thank you so much. Congratulations on
Absolutely.
this incredible victory, and thank you for being with us today. Hopefully we'll see you again
Josh.
soon, and much success in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
You're tuned in to Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is the great Dustin Hammond, musical guest, Dustin Hammond from the band Run On Sentence. Dustin, you and I have played before thousands of people, and we've played in pizza parlors where there was like 2 people and they weren't even paying attention. It's a long way down rock and roll. What is it that you strive for before we get to song in terms of making music? Is it internal? Is it a connection? What is it where does it come from?
For me, it is almost like a spiritual practice. Maybe that sounds cheesy or something, but like I like to start songs when I'm kind of out of my head a little bit. I like to get I like to let melodies sort of just come through me. I like to sit out in nature and just like listen to the wind and stuff, or just kind of close my eyes and lay there until something just sort of wells up internally. But then in the writing process, sometimes I get really into pop music and stuff, and I get really into like producing when I get in my studio, but I like to kind of approach it from both sides,
I find the songs so dramatic. They're like little plays, or they're like little movies, or like little tragedies, or they can also be extraordinarily celebratory, like Do the Jellyfish. I don't know what you want to play, man. I would love to hear all your songs right now, but we have time for one. So pick it.
How about a little Feelings?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Everybody's got a lot of feelings these days. It's good.
From the balcony of time, watch rainbows come, color my mind. Oh, we're soaking in the sun. Out here in the moonlight, long after the day is done, and I could melt into the silence but the silence is deafening, and I can't hear the lines, no. So I think I'll just drift back to that bright horizon, float like a cloud boat up into those purple skies, 'cause I don't wanna feel like alone anymore. No, I just wanna feel. That's what feelings are for, yeah. Hanging uptown with the sound of sight. Downtown they drive their troubles into the ground, but up here we're riding rainbows and light. So I think I'll have just one more unthink until I sink, settle level with the floor, 'cause I don't wanna feel like alone anymore. No, I just wanna feel. Oh, damn, my feelings are for you. I don't wanna feel like alone anymore. No, I just wanna feel. Oh, damn, my feelings are I just wanna feel.
Dustin Hammond. The band is Run On Sentence. The record is Feelings. The song is Feelings. And feelings are what I'm feeling right now. That was amazing, man. Always, always amazing. Also, one of the greatest mouth trumpet players on the planet. You know, money can't buy you love, and money also can't buy you a mouth trumpet. It's one of those things that you
Can't buy you a banjo player.
also, no, actually, that's not true. I'm available for hire. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, wedding bar mitzvahs. That's your deal. Banjos are often at any kind of function, pizza party, whatever. So, film festival, root canal, whatever you think the banjo goes along with, I'm there. I'm totally there. But tell us, Dustin, how do we find more Dustin Hammond Run On Sentence?
Currently, most of what I'm doing is my Patreon stuff. I do my CSM, which stands for Community Supported Music. and I release a song every month, and then I have the bonus thing, which you're aware of, where I release more once a month. But it keeps me having some sort of regular income because it's a monthly thing, and it keeps me creative and making new stuff every month. And so that's the best place to see what I'm currently up to, and that's just look up Dustin Hammond on Patreon.
Yeah, and I think you definitely have to go out and get the records. The records are extraordinary. I mean, they changed my life. So you were saying how your songs are they're like spiritual journeys, and the melodies are coming. Bob Dylan used to say, or I guess he may still say, that you're sort of, was it Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie? It might have been Woody Guthrie that said you have to kind of be downwind from it. Like it's coming from there and it passes through and it goes some other place. But I always feel like you're so mild-mannered when you talk. You barely speak above a whisper. And then you do these songs where you're just like this incredibly emotional apex arias mixed with howling banshee at the same time. Like, what's going on there?
I don't know. I hear that a lot, and I just like people are like, oh, I talked to you before, and then I saw you sing, and I was not expecting that, and but I just I don't know. That's just the way I am normally. But when it comes to making music, I feel like songs want to go somewhere, and I hear them in my head, and I had to figure out how to get them there. Sometimes
they're really extreme, They're sort of like, I find them extreme. I mean, in a way, there's a folk feeling to them, but like people don't understand that like that kind of music can also be incredibly extreme. Like Dave Van Ronk would go and blow you across the room, and you're sitting there with a guy with an acoustic guitar. Although Run On Sentence can be a huge amount of people, right? Run On Sentence can be 9 musicians or whatever it is. Yeah. But that depth of the extremes that you go to, the music takes you there.
Yeah.
I've never asked you this kind of stuff before. It's so weird to ask you these questions.
I think it also helps that I think I sing better when I sing louder sometimes. My pitch is usually more on, I think. And so sometimes I just naturally start singing louder. But also I've toured so many places where I didn't have PAs and stuff. And of course, you've been there when I've been asked to turn down and I wasn't even using a PA. So
yeah, that was a bad evening. We don't even have to go there. But yeah, that was one of those. We were just playing so nicely and so well, and then like somebody was offended. Anyway, we're gonna say goodbye, and I hope I see you down that long dusty trail, or you come here, which would also be great. And we have some recordings that the two of us did together that I think, let's hope, I have some plans for in the future, but we'll see.
I hope so. All right, it's great to see you.
It's awesome to see you, Dusty, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Let's talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, that's our show for today. You've been tuned in to Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Don't stay home. Go out and protest. Go out and make your voice heard. But if you're not protesting, stay home, because we have to get out of this virus thing. We have to. Okay? Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help, and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. In Michigan, State Leader Tara West and Captain Justine Robinson organized the team's first Beer and Politics. How fun does that sound? Look, they thought of this idea at one of their monthly meetups in order to help connect TYT supporters and grow their team's volunteers. Here's what Tara had to say. Our first Beer and Politics event in Grand Rapids was a success. We had 5 new people show up who are enthusiastic about TYT. They all found out about our event through our text bank, and they liked the laid-back nature of our get-together. Looking forward to connecting with them next month and hopefully meeting a few more. Thank you, Tara and Justine, for leading the way in Michigan. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
Like all small businesses, we're struggling through this pandemic right now. We are doing a drive to keep TYT healthy. We want to be able to keep doing it, and it's been a Herculean task.
Ready for transport.
We're trying to raise $2 million overall, $200,000 a month if we can. If you can, and only if you can, tyt.com/go. Seriously, because we can't sustain this show without you. So thank you for making all this possible.
Where else can I feel as free as I do here to do what I do? And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for all the people who have really carried us throughout the years.
You're our ultimate boss. We report to you guys, and if you don't like what we're doing on air or we're not telling the truth, boom, you fire us.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Keep TYT alive, healthy, wonderful, awesome, independent, progressive. Keep it all those things. In fact, we have a new theme, Press On. Get it? It's a double meaning. tyt.com/go. I know what you're thinking. Cenk, where do I get unlimited, commission-free stock and ETF trades? Man, do I have good news for you. dough.com/TYT. Yes, it's really unlimited trading. Yes, it's totally commission-free. Yes, they explain what an ETF is if you don't know it. That's what's great about Dough, because they have wonderful explainer videos, and you got 0 minimum balance. You got nothing for commissions. dough.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Derek Black, who is the author of Schoolhouse Burning and a professor at USC Law School. How are you doing in the middle of this ridiculous time? Ridiculous is a kind word for it.
Yeah, I'm doing as well as I can. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, well, good to hear it. I wanted to talk a little bit about your book and just the topic of public education in this country, which is constantly under assault. I would say more so under this administration than it has been in a while, although, when you look, it can be kind of ubiquitous across both parties when we're talking about public education. Can you talk about what you see in terms of the state of things and also what your thoughts are when it comes to the push to return to schools and just in general?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think something has changed in the last decade, and you're right. I mean, public education has had its problems over the last decade and several decades. But if you really look at the way that the language has changed in the last few years, what we find is a direct attack on the idea of public education itself. So, in prior administrations and prior times, there may have been differences of opinion about what's sort of the most effective policy. Should we have small class size, large class size? But all of that was a debate within a public education system. What we now literally have are people saying that we should do away with the public education itself, that we should move towards a privatized system. And so that's a fundamental change in terms of how we talk about schools. And of course, the current crisis is creating leverage for that. The Secretary of Education DeVos and President Trump, they've had their design on privatization for quite some time. But what they have done is use this current pandemic as an excuse to further demonize public schools and blame the pandemic on them, right? So it's their fault that we can't have school, but private schools, they're great, they're ready and willing, that's the narrative. And so they've tried to move more money into the private sector and more students out of the public sector.
Yeah, and I think it's clear why they're doing this. Obviously, there's a profit motivation, but usually when you're seeing the privatization of schools and the push for it, it tends to be not in the wealthiest areas of the country, not in the whitest areas of the country. Can you talk about how that push nationally is more, I was gonna say quarantined, but more sectioned off in the South and in minority areas than it is in wider areas of the country?
Yeah, that was one of the most troubling things that I found in doing my research. I mean, when I first began, I was looking at privatization and the challenge to public education at really a national level and hadn't drilled down on the geographic and the racial aspects of it. But there's some great reports and studies out there by the Network for Public Education. And what I did was take the data that they had produced and mapped it out in terms of who had the most privatization, who had the least. And when we look at our states that have the highest level of white students, there's almost no privatization there. So if we look in the upper Northwest or the Midwest, Nebraska, there's almost no privatization there at all. Also, West Virginia, right? Almost entirely white, rural West Virginia, none. But when you look at the Southeast, there's this huge, enormous block where there is extremely high levels of privatization, and the same thing in the Southwest as well. So what I sort of tell in the book is the idea that this push to privatize is also caught up with the idea that government, or at least some aspects of government, does not want to fund the public education of low income and minority children.
And I mean, I think that boogie woman for that kind of perspective is really exemplified by Betsy DeVos. She's obviously kind of had her mask off when it comes to her very obvious efforts to privatize education in this country. And that was a huge part of her legacy in Michigan. So can you talk about her effect on public education and what that, how that fit into your research?
Well, I'll have to say that she kind of caught me off guard. I was talking to some folks in Michigan recently, and he said, "Well, why is that? She's behaved this way for a long time." And I said, "Yeah, but normal people don't normally behave this way." The idea that the U.S. Secretary of Education would leverage a pandemic to further her agenda was just startling. I mean, and she's been around for 3 years. You think I would have not been surprised, but I think even Congress was. I mean, they wrote the CARES Act assuming that at least for this period of time, she would put aside her agenda and just do what's right by kids, right? Congress handed out, hundreds of millions of dollars for public education to make sure they were safe, distance learning, et cetera. And what does she do? As soon as she gets the money, she starts talking about creating a voucher program with that money. She starts insisting that public schools share enormous amounts of their money with the private schools and passing regulations to that effect. And then starts, suggesting to governors that they ought to use their coronavirus funds for vouchers as well. And it's really just amazing. It's like when you go to the doctor, you expect the doctor to treat you. You don't expect the doctor to sell you cell phones, for instance. Well, I think when we have a Secretary of Education, we expect her to take care of public schools, not try to take care of private schools, at least in a pandemic. But she's proven me wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, the grift is unbelievable. And I think it's a shamelessness that's rampant in her family. Obviously, Eric Prince is one of the most notorious mercenaries in the country, and Betsy DeVos has shown similar shamelessness. Can you talk, though, about, you're talking about vouchers. Can you explain to the viewer what vouchers are when it comes to talking about public school funding? Because I think they can sound innocuous, but what it really does is just saps public school systems of resources.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, on one level, we all love for someone to pay for something else for us. And on one level, that is the innocuous sounding nature of private school. Well, if I can get government to pay for it, why shouldn't I? Or I'm already paying taxes, well, why shouldn't I get something back? But the way that at least state level vouchers operate, and the ones that are floating around out there, is here in South Carolina, for instance, the bill has been that whatever amount of money that the state normally gives to a public school for public education, if that student decides that they want to go to private school, they will take the entirety, or the plan is to take the entirety of those funds and give them to the private school. So that doesn't now. So let's think about it. Let's say that 10 kids leave a high school, for instance, and that means, let's say, $60,000 comes out of the public school budget and goes to private schools. But that public school is going to still need the exact same number of teachers, have the exact same light bill, have the exact same number of bus routes to run. And so their costs aren't going to go down, but $60,000 just went out the door. And a lot of schools, we're talking about a lot more than just $60,000. So it is literally robbing the public coffers and sending it to a private institution. And that's the point, right? They do want to destabilize the public system and move children towards a private system.
And can you, one, explain further the incentive structure behind doing so? Why Betsy DeVos and others like her want that to happen? And I kind of know the answer, but I will also add, I feel like when talking about charter schools, a lot of people have gotten themselves to believe that, well, then this allows the cream to rise to the top. Then the children who are the most talented will benefit from this, and they've kind of internalized that, as opposed to saying, oh no, these systems that could benefit everybody could allow for more prosperity for all students. And then secondly, why you kind of think education is seen as a bit of a dry topic in this country when it's so integral to how every child becomes who they are and how they affect our society.
Yeah, well, in terms of the motivations, I mean, there is, putting DeVos aside just for a moment, but it's sort of the overall ideology there. Ultimately, you have the Koch brothers and a lot of other folks like that going back decades that believes that government in the United States is designed, or what it has been designed to do in recent decades, is take money from wealthy people and give it to poor people, right? And so, at the federal level, the number one target is healthcare, Social Security, things of that nature. But at the state and local level, the overwhelming amount of money is spent on public schools. So if you think government is extracting money and giving it to poor people at the local level, we're talking about public education. So a lot of this is just about lowering taxes, like reducing governmental responsibility. And as Grover Norquist has said, to shrink government to the size that you can drown it in a bathtub. And that's ultimately what they're trying to do. The other part of this, though, which you're mentioning, is that when kids leave so the public system is open to everyone. They don't get to say no to any child, but the private system can pick and choose. And so what we really are seeing in the private system, whether it be charters or vouchers, is a sorting of students, that they sort into groups based upon religion, they sort into groups based upon other demographics, socioeconomic status, and race. And so we go from a public system that must accept all to a private one that looks much differently than that. And our private schools and our charter schools, for instance, have far, far fewer students with disability, for instance, than our public schools. So they are taking what we might say the cheapest students to educate, the non-disabled, and leaving the most expensive students in the public schools. Same thing with ELL students. So we see this sort of dynamic of the sorting out of students, those that the private system wants to teach and those that it does not want to teach, and it produces segregation.
Right, it's just segregation by another name. I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. Can you tell people where they can find it and how they can read it?
Yeah, Schoolhouse Burning. It's available, anywhere books are sold. And if you want to get sort of up-to-date reviews and that sort of thing, you can follow me on @DerrickW.Black. And I'm always sort of talking about what the hot topics of the day are in education law and inequality.
Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you too.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey. Hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream,
But I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Jank. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot. If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
We're gonna do a little thing we like to call Weekly World News. Weekly World News! I cull stories from around the globe, stories that aren't covered on the main show or aren't covered enough, and I turn it into a 5-question quiz for Dave and Steve. All right, do we have our answers? A from Dave and C from Steve, and the correct answer is B, an oil tanker that sank off the coast of China. Okay, we have one answer of B and one answer of C. What is the correct answer? It is, of course, A, an airplane wing walking stunt gone wrong. Okay, we have an answer of A from Dave and C from Steve. The correct answer is B. We have an answer of B and C. What is the correct answer in true Weekly World News tradition? It's A.
Come on.
Taking the bear out for ice cream.
That can't possibly be true. We're terrible today. Just terrible.
When news is breaking and when you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time. When news breaks, when news is breaking and you like. When news is breaking and you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time for Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Hey everyone, welcome to the conversation. I'm here with Angelica Duenas, who is a candidate for Congress running in California's 29th district. You're running in a jungle primary, I hear, so you don't have to worry about going after a Democratic candidate from the left, and the Democratic Party hopefully won't smear you as someone who wants Trump to secretly win or something like that.
That's right. That's right. We already got through the primary, and now we have this opportunity here in the 29th district to have a progressive take over and really give the people an option and a candidate, a representative that's willing to fight for the people and not the corporation.
Right, and you have an enormously progressive platform. Healthcare is a human right, criminal justice reform, a Green New Deal, public education as a right. You talk about progressive foreign policy in your platform. Can you expand upon that? Because it drives me nuts how underserved that topic is, say just on issues of, Yemen or how we deal with Israel. What are some of your ideas on that front?
Yes, I think that one of the things that we have in our platform that should be highlighted is the idea of cutting military spending by 50%. We're not talking about, ending our military or anything drastic like that. What we're talking about is if you take a look at where military spending is going, 50% of it outright goes to private contractors. Less than 25% of military spending actually goes to the military, to the people. It gets spent away on private contracts, on purchasing arms, that at the end of it all, they get unused, most of them. And when they do get used, is to cause destruction and or to pass them on to other countries to do the destruction by proxy for us. So when we're talking about foreign policy, we're talking about a foreign policy based on peace and really building communication and commitments throughout the world for peace. And that's throughout the Middle East, that's throughout South America, and really throughout the world. We want to really emphasize that many of the problems that we're seeing here in the United States is because of problems that we have caused in one way or another. Some people see the immigration issue that has been plaguing some folks as far as because they need to leave their country, leave their home because of either war, famine, or economic hardship. And now we're seeing actually environmental crisis also as a reason why people are needing to move. They're not able to plant the crops that they once were able to. They're not able to really, they don't have water that they usually have access to because of drought. So these are all of these things that need to be focused on. And instead of really spending our funding on war, we need to be funding emphasizing the importance of climate change and really communications building and partnerships that we need to focus on. We need to focus on life, not death. And that is really what we're trying to emphasize in our platform, top to bottom, and locally and globally.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, no one gets rich off that kind of thinking. So what are you gonna do? But speaking though of those kinds of topics, you did I guess in 2017, protest outside Senator Dianne Feinstein's office, and in order to secure more humane treatment of our dreamers. And she has been central to so many of the military-industrial complex's desires. Her work on the Intelligence Committee. Can you talk about why you felt the need to protest in front of her office and how that informs your candidacy, and just also the topics you were just discussing?
We were there in support of one of a dreamer that led a group of people who we were trying to push, and this happened throughout the country. So we were one of many groups that were going to their representative's office and asking, demanding that they did not vote, did not approve the budget for the year, did not vote to approve the budget, to hold back, and to, as the Democratic Party, really force for the Republicans to include a DREAM Act in the year's budget. So we wanted not a DACA, which is a temporary deferment of deportation, but a permanent solution, a path to citizenship. Unfortunately, the Democrats did not stand with the Dreamers, and they went ahead and pushed to approve the budget that year. So that was the action that we took. And unfortunately, we were not even allowed to enter the lobby. We were arrested the second that we sat down in front of the building and whisked away off premises. Fortunately, we were not brought in since we did have a dreamer with us. We didn't want to affect his status in any sort of way. So we did, listen to the officers' warnings that if we did return, that there would be an actual arrest. And so fortunately, nobody was arrested. We were just removed from the property.
Well, that's good news, because unfortunately, officers sometimes don't give that forewarning, especially when dealing with left-wing protesters as opposed to right-wingers, which obviously we've seen so much throughout this year. So can you talk about that? What you just referenced about Democratic weakness when it comes to negotiations. Part of what Republicans do is they leverage the marginally greater humanity that Democrats have to get away with absolute atrocities. So Democrats are really unable to be strategic in the kind of things that they're negotiating over in Congress because they will just fold quite quickly. Why do you think that is, and what do you bring differently as a stronger progressive voice in this race?
I think what it is that, what we've been, our hunch is really that, the people in power are not there to represent the people. They're there to represent the corporations and their overlords. And so when it comes down to it, these people who are in power, they are, this is what they've done. This is what they do. And what it is that we do not have real representation in any sort of level of government. We do not have working class representation, and that's the problem. We have people who have been bought out and who have been compromised. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing compromised representation, and that is why I'm running for Congress here in California's 29th congressional district, because much like what we're seeing from both sides of the aisle, we're seeing from our representative Tony Cardenas, who has actually been in power here in our community for over 23 years at all levels. He had 8 years in the state assembly, 10 years in city council, and now 8 years in Congress. And throughout his career, he's shown us very, very much the same. His loyalty lies with the corporations. He's taken millions and millions of dollars from mega corporations in his 20 plus years of being a politician. He's a career politician, and it's time to put an end to that. I believe in term limits. I believe that, representing our community should be a civil service that you do it and you move on. And so this is where we're at. We're seeing that we have people who have been bought out and who are not prepared to represent us. So it's our responsibility as the people to vote these people out and to look around us for the replacements. Who are we going to put in power? Because these positions are out. I advocate for seeking out positions of power and occupy them. So this is what our homework is. This is our role. Right now that we're seeing our ballot books come out and our sample books come out, we need to take a look at who's in these seats and who needs to get voted out.
Well, certainly. And lastly, just to touch on your race specifically, you're in a solid blue district. Your opponent has won fairly handily over and over again, and now you're a challenge to that. Have you gotten any pushback from the National Democratic Party or the DCCC or anything like that, even though it's 2 Democrats in the general election? So they really shouldn't be taking any sides, ostensibly, and should be happy with whoever wins the seat.
Well, what I can say is that locally, the Democratic Party has not listened to us, or even brought us into the discussion or consideration for endorsements or any of the sort. So we're definitely not getting the support. He's gotten endorsed by the local and the national Democratic Party. So we're not getting pushback per se. We've been, if anything, ignored for the time being, and left out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of their playbook. They could be going after you and smearing you regularly. I'm happy. This seems like a better scenario for you than the alternative outcome. But still, look, I mean, we already know where their loyalties lie. It's with the candidate that's furthest to the right, unless they go completely over the pale and they start saying anti-choice things or whatever, like Dan Lipinski. But yeah, I think it's awesome that you've made it to the general and that you're fortunately going to be able to mount a challenge here. So wish you the best of luck. And where can people find out more about your race?
You can find us at angelica4congress.com. That's Angelica, the number 4, congress.com. Check us out. Maybe we can earn your support.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Janky Granick sparing with you guys. I've got good news and I got bad news for you guys. Let's start with the bad news, at least for us. Well, for all of us who were trying to get progressive change. So for the first time, we did not hit our monthly goal in September. So it's gone. We're in October. Sad day for us. So we're trying to raise $200,000 every month this year at tyt.com/go. Keep the progressive message strong. Keep fighting for change and get word out there. And by the way, and so we've off to a good start in October, though, 8,976, tyt.com/go. I'd love to make up that money that we couldn't get in September. I just want to, but seriously, though, guys, I want to thank you. You guys don't know this, but we've been able to keep every employee through coronavirus, and you guys are a huge part of that. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So now, good news, Trump is doing disastrously in the polls. I'm going to do more live videos about that, keep you updated on all the polls. So make sure you're checking that out on tyt.com. More good news. You remember how Trump lied about we're going to plant 1 trillion trees? That's what he said a while back. Now it's down to we're going to plant 1 billion trees. He hasn't planted a single tree. On the other hand, our sponsor Aspiration has already planted 2 million trees, also thanks partly to you guys. So everybody who signs up, they plant 10 trees. When you round up, they plant a tree for you rounding up. It's amazing service. So it's a good place to keep your money. It's actually a great place to keep your money and be progressive. So aspiration.com/TYT. And then tonight, a programming note, Ravi Patel from HBO Max new show, Pursuit of Happiness. He's also going to be in the new Wonder Woman, is going to be on tonight on Between Me and Uyghur, twitch.tv/TYT. So check that out. I can't wait for that conversation. I've got a couple of thoughts about the Pursuit of Happiness. You guys are not going to be surprised by that, but it's going to be a great conversation. So that's at 8 o'clock Eastern, must-see TV tonight on Twitch. All right, Casper, what do we got today?
All right. Well, we start off with the election. In an effort to essentially skew the election in favor of Republicans by suppressing the vote, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has announced that several ballot drop-off sites throughout the state of Texas will be closed. And this is a reversal of an order that he had implemented in July, which essentially noticed that the coronavirus was going to ensure that more people were going to want to vote by mail. So he actually ordered more of these drop-off sites to open as a result. But now that it appears that Donald Trump and the Republican Party is facing tough re-election campaigns, Greg Abbott seems to be switching gears here. So counties will be limited to just one drop-off site where poll watchers designated by political parties and candidates must be allowed to observe ballot deliveries by voters. So this new order takes effect on Friday of this week, meaning that every county in Texas will only have one ballot drop-off place. Please vote early. Please show up early, drop it off early, considering these changes that Greg Abbott is now implementing. A previous order, though, from July 27th was very different. So Abbott's July 27th order acknowledged the pandemic's danger by adding 6 days of early voting and waiving a state law that limits mail-in ballot drop-off to Election Day only. Limiting the number of drop-off sites will affect large urban counties that are strongly Democratic or trending in that direction. And the Texas Democratic Party said Abbott's new order appeared targeted at a rising Texas electorate. So that's what the situation is on the ground in Texas. This is what Republicans do. They know their ideas are unpopular, so they have to cheat to win. And so I'm curious to see how aggressively state Democrats are going to fight back against this. But if history, teaches us anything about Democrats, it's that they're weak and they, usually just release strong statements, but then don't follow up with real action. So with that said, again, vote early and make sure that your vote counts.
So if you're trying to figure out where and how to vote in your neck of the woods, tyt.com/vote gets you the information that you need. So check that out. Now, in this story, there's a couple of important things. Now, if you're wondering, why did Abbott bother opening up all those places to drop off mail-in votes in the first place? Don't Republicans hate mail-in voting? And so when he switches, it looks even uglier and more hypocritical. Well, that's because Republicans used to have an advantage in mail-in voting until political suicide bomber Donald Trump showed up at the scene and blew up the entire Republican Party. So tons of Republicans behind the scenes are now talking to the press going, make him stop. Why does he keep saying things against mail-in voting? It's a disaster. And remember, a lot of the Republican voters are older voters and they love mail-in voting. So in the beginning, the Republican Party in Texas is like, yeah, mail-in ballots, awesome, let's do it, yes, right? Now that Trump has devastated mail-in ballots on the Republican side and nobody's sending them in, and the Democrats are sending them in swarms, now they panic and go, oh, no, we didn't mean mail-in voting. We didn't, no, because of something, we're going to have to shut down almost all of the places where you can drop off your mail-in ballots. So what is that so-called something? We're going to need poll watchers. There's not enough poll watchers at these polling locations. First of all, they're not polling locations. You just drop off your ballot. Polling locations are totally different. That's for a day of voting when you're actually going to vote at that location, not drop off your vote. So that's their very, very thin excuse. And say, we just don't have enough staff. Really? You're the state of Texas. You have all the staff in the world. We don't have enough staff for poll watchers from both parties. I bet you Biden's team will get you plenty of people if you need them. And Trump says he's got 50,000 poll watchers all across the country. So, look, we have to explain these things for two reasons. One, the media will not be clear with you guys. They'll say, Abbott did this. No one knows why. They know why. They just don't want to tell you because of political correctness. They don't want to offend Republicans. And of course, Fox News and Republicans lie to you. In this case, they probably won't even bother because it's embarrassing to talk about how their party is against more voting and more democracy. So don't let them dissuade you, whether it's Texas or anywhere else. Still, there is some locations left, so it's not like you can't do it at all. So make sure you go ahead and do that. And enjoy the fact that the Republicans are scared to death of your votes. So right now, North Carolina, Arizona, Iowa, every Republican consultant, especially for the senators, are sweating buckets, going, we're ruined because Trump talked against mail-in voting. The advantage Democrats have in mail-in voting is going to kill the entire Republican Party. I love it. You should love it. Go vote.
And one final note for voters in Texas, there are some rules when you drop off your ballots. I want to tell you what those rules are. You have to drop off your own mail-in ballot, so they don't allow ballot harvesters in Texas. So you have to show up yourself to drop off your ballot. You have to show your photo ID. They're going to ask you to sign a roster and deposit your sealed, it must be sealed envelope into the ballot box. So those are the rules. Make sure you're aware of them and you're prepared to meet these rules when you drop off your ballots early.
So I love that we do this show together. Just while we were doing this one story, here are the folks who signed up by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Zachary Garland, LaShonda Williams, Gregory Vandenberg, Seb's Veg Meat, that's their handle, Brianne Kane, and William Milvey. Love you guys. You're the Young Turks.
Well, let's give you guys an update on what's happening with the stimulus negotiations. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have apparently re-engaged in negotiations regarding the next round of stimulus. And I say next round of stimulus, but really the future of a next round of stimulus is still uncertain. There have been some concessions by Steve Mnuchin, probably because he realized that so many of these major corporations are now doing mass layoffs since the PPP money for small businesses has not only run out, but the rules tied to that money, which would essentially have these businesses keep their employees on staff, have expired. So now we're hearing about major companies laying off tens of thousands of people, and that's not a good look for Trump's reelection campaign. So Mnuchin's plan included $250 billion for state and local governments. Remember, that's something that they were absolutely against before, which is $186 billion less than Democrats want in their latest $2.2 trillion package, but $100 billion more than the White House offered in talks that broke down over the summer. Luckily, there's some emphasis on continuing unemployment benefits that are more robust through the help of the federal government, but it still falls short of what unemployed individuals received earlier with $600 a week. On unemployment insurance, Mnuchin proposed $400 per week in the federal benefit, retroactive to September 12th and lasting through January 1st, 2021. That's less than the $600 a week Democrats want, but $100 more than Senate Republicans have proposed. And again, Democrats have made their own concessions by lowering the cost of their initial stimulus bill to $2.2 trillion. But Mnuchin made it clear that the right wing will absolutely reject that proposal. And here he is making that statement on Fox Business.
We're not going to do a $2.2 trillion deal. The good news is the Speaker has come down from her $3.4 trillion deal. If there's a fair compromise, we're prepared to do it.
A fair compromise, yet within that, as I understand the bill that could have been voted upon tonight, there would be no money now for law enforcement as there was in the earlier higher package that Pelosi had presented to you. That's now absent. It seems to be going, at least in a number of elements, the wrong direction. 2.2 is still vastly higher than the number that the president wants. What is there a median number here that is magical in terms of reaching agreement?
Well, the president instructed us to come up significantly, so we have come up from the $1 trillion deal that we had been working on earlier. He's very focused on wanting to make sure that all the people who have been impacted by COVID, no fault of their own, we're delivering relief. As I've said before, our job is not done until we get everybody back to work, and we're going to keep trying.
So, Cenk, I love how Lou Dobbs is like, oh, this is going in the wrong direction. We're going to help poor people and less funding for law enforcement. What are we doing? Like, he's such a terrible person. But anyway, go ahead.
You know, in this case, if you just cared about politics, the sides are backwards. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you're the president, you should want a stimulus bill as large as humanly possible a month before the election so that the economy can get stimulated, whether it's overstimulated, whether it's a bubble, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's based on your Republican principles or not. You should want to inject as much money into the economy and honestly get all the voters $1,200 check right before the election. Are you crazy? It's a no-brainer. But they're Republicans. They can't help themselves. So they're like, I don't want to give it to average Americans. I just don't want to. And you're giving it to states and you're giving it to people who are unemployed. Can't we just give it to the rich again? Damn it. I don't want to do this deal. They're nuts not to do the deal. And then on the other side, I guess in a sense, give the Democrats credit because they really are trying to get money to all those folks, the unemployed states, et cetera, when they're kind of nuts to do the deal before the election. And I'm glad they're doing it because you got to get relief to those people. So I care 1,000 times more about the policy than I do about politics. But, you know, the opposition party giving the president a month before the election a $1,200 check to hand out to almost all Americans, it's not politically savvy. But again, I'm not blaming them for it. I think it's actually principled. I'm giving them credit for it.
I hear what you're saying, Cenk. It's just that the House had passed a stimulus bill months ago. And my issue with how Nancy Pelosi handled that situation was she thought that all she could do or all she should do is just simply pass a bill and then sit around and think that Americans are going to figure out that this bill is being blocked by Mitch McConnell. Like, sure, there are people who realize that. There are people who know that. Would you argue that the majority of Americans know that? Of course they don't. She had to make her case. She had to use the bully pulpit in order to basically call out the Republican Party and the fact that they've been blocking this bill for months. Instead, you know, she was just, I don't know what she was doing, calling press conferences to talk about how a salon allegedly set her up. She'll hold a press conference for that, but she won't hold a press conference, and she should have done it on the regular, calling out Steve Mnuchin, the Trump administration, and more importantly, Mitch McConnell for blocking a more robust version of the stimulus bill much earlier. I also want to note that the economic ramifications of, Congress's inaction are pretty serious, and we're starting to see it now. So as I talked about yesterday on the show, a number of companies announced that they would be laying off tens of thousands of workers. Disney said that it'll lay off 28,000 employees across its parks, experiences, and consumer products divisions amid prolonged closures at its California-based theme parks, as well as limited attendance. And that's according to their own statement. They also say that 67% of their laid off workers were part-time. A number of their employees actually reached out to me via social media. They asked to remain anonymous. But the right-wing talking point in regard to the Disney layoffs has been, oh, it's Gavin Newsom. He's destroying businesses by having these social distancing guidelines and urging companies and businesses to remain closed amid the pandemic. But these employees are saying, no, we want to be safe. We actually do not disagree with what Gavin Newsom wants to do. We don't want to get sick, but they obviously do need financial assistance, which, Congress has really failed on. And the airline industry has laid off 30,000 employees. The list goes on and on and on. And so I think Republicans and the Trump administration realize the seriousness of this moment, not necessarily because they care about the American people and their well-being, but because this could really hurt them in this upcoming election.
So, Anna, we could have reopened Disney and so many other businesses, at least the theme parks, if we had done testing and tracing, which is what the rest of the world did. I was going to say developed world, but really almost all of the rest of the world except us. We're now basically a fourth world country, worst in deaths, worst in cases, worst in so many things. We barely do any contact tracing at all in America. Whereas New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan are excellent at contact tracing. So is Germany. So that way you can quarantine a much smaller group of people rather than shutting down the whole economy. It's a win-win. You keep your health is better off, and so is your economic health. But you would need a smart, competent leader to do that, and not a psycho party like the Republicans in charge who don't do science and then go, screw the mask, don't worry about it, let's just open without any precautions. So in this bill that we're talking about here, there's $75 billion for testing and tracing. So no matter what the politics of it is, I want it passed because we desperately need testing and tracing so we could reopen the economy, people can get their jobs back, and we could all go outside. There's also other great parts like rental and mortgage assistance. There's help with the airlines.
For that.
Yeah, there's paycheck protection program for small businesses. So, but your point on the earlier politics of it is indisputable. So I want to end on that. Guys, look, I'm giving the Democrats credit here for being principled, even though the optics of this is going to help Trump if they pass it. But it didn't have to help Trump. In fact, it should have been the opposite. If Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and every Democrat out there and Joe Biden were all out there going, why aren't you passing the bill? The bill, my God, the small businesses, the testing, the tracing, the states, $1,200 checks. We demand that Trump pass it. And we're furious that Trump and the Republicans aren't passing it. By the time Trump agreed, then he wouldn't get credit for it. People would say, oh, the Democrats did a good job of breaking Trump and making him accept these things for the American people. But as usual, the Democrats are terrible at making their own case. So as Anna pointed out, they're talking about hair salons and Nancy Pelosi's personal business more than they are about this bill, so that when it passes, Trump will take credit for it. And people who don't follow the news closely, and those are the most important independent voters, will have no idea that the Democrats are on the right side of this.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, we have some strong Democrats because they do exist. After we come back from the break, Katie Porter takes the pharmaceutical industry to task. You don't want to miss it. Come right back.
Young Turks is the largest progressive media outlet in the world. You know who built that? You did. So I want to give folks credit for actually being the heroes behind this. These are folks who contributed at tyt.com/go. Catherine W. from Ohio, Jose P. from California, Lydia R. from Pennsylvania, Richard W. from California, Saul R. from Arizona, Robert H. from North Dakota, Donna M. from Oregon. You all made this possible, and you can too at tyt.com/go.
PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Okay. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
All right, back on the Young Turks. First of all, a message about our sponsor, Too Strong Coffee. It's organic, it's fair trade. Coffee's for causers. So if you buy 2 bags or more, they give money to Wolfpack, Just Democrats, Rebellion PAC, TYT, all things that help progressives get the message out and fight back. If you buy 3 cups or more, You get a mug, not necessarily this one, but the logo is the same. TwoStrongCoffee.com/TYT. So check that out, and it also tastes excellent. So now I want to go to you guys. I want to go to the member section. Eclectic Miscellanea says the media's approach to the 2020 elections. Fox News lies about the attack on voting. Rest of the mainstream media plays dumb about why it's happening or what can be done. TYT tells us what's happening, says what Dems need to do, and gives voters the information we need to vote. Thank you, but that really is true. That's almost exactly what happens. And that's why we do tyt.com/go. Part of the reason why those media companies do what they do is they're either hooked on advertising money and hence have to serve corporations. Keep it real. That's exactly what it is. Okay. Or they're hooked on access to the Republican Party, Fox News, or Democratic Party, MSNBC. So tyt.com/go to power us, or and become a member if you can. tyt.com/join, like Eclectic Miscellanea did, and we read your comments more often. Or you could hit the join button below if you're on YouTube. So these are the folks who just did that: Jenny Van Vormer, Adam R., Christopher Young, Timothy Komani, Yadamane, Butchie, Bilo, Infinite Content, Dr. Hui 2016, Paul Green, Pamela Hannon, John Sivak, Shelby Goldenberg. Yes, there's a lot of you. Yes, there's a lot of all of us, and I love it. Keep it going. We keep reading your names. Last couple here are from YouTube Super Chat. William Milvey, who just joined up in the last segment, said, I'm a disabled vet. I just joined after watching for years. Thank you for all you do. No, William, thank you for what you do, because we do this show together. And last one is, I'm Cullen 8, made a point that I forgot to make during the Texas story. Thank you for bringing it up. Saying, Texas must be in play. That's exactly right. Abbott is panicking because, oh my God, the Democrats might win Texas. So that's amazing news. All right, we got a lot more for you right now.
All right, so Representative Katie Porter eviscerated Big Pharma during a recent House oversight hearing on pharmaceutical drugs and the price gouging that many Americans are certainly experiencing. Let's watch.
Do you know what this number is? Does it ring any bells?
But I think you're referring to my compensation in some way.
Yeah, well, in some way. This was your compensation in 2017 for being CEO of Celgene, and that's a lot of money. It's 200 times the average American's income and 360 times what the average senior gets on Social Security. Now, of that 13 million, about 2.1 million came from your company hitting yearly earning targets. And more than half of the bonus formula was based on those targets. Any increase in the price of Revlimid would also increase your bonus by increasing earnings. Isn't that right, Mr. Ellis?
If revenues increased and expenses did not, then earnings would be enhanced.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, in fact, the Oversight Committee found that if you hadn't increased the price of Revlimid, you wouldn't have gotten your bonus.
So the CEO that Representative Katie Porter was questioning in that hearing is the Celgene CEO, Mark Ellis, and apparently they had increased the cost of Revlimid, which is a cancer drug, to $763 per dose. In 2005, it cost $215 per dose.
Yeah. So first of all, Katie Porter is legend. I love what she does with the whiteboard, but whiteboard's a nice tool because it focuses people. But really, it's her line of questioning and how she logically gets to the core of the issue. And so she's pointing out, look, your bonus is tied to increased profits. Makes sense. If you're making sneakers, well, it doesn't really matter, right? If people want to buy sneakers, they'll buy sneakers. If they don't, they don't. Okay, so that no harm, no foul. But these are drugs that save people's lives. Okay, that's point one. So it's not optional. Point two is, well, if that's the cost of the drug, what can you do, right? But we know it's not the cost of the drug because they sell it at much lower prices everywhere else in the world. So what's the difference? As Katie Porter explained, well, the difference is we are not allowed to negotiate drug prices in America on behalf of the United States government and on behalf of the U.S. taxpayers. That's insane. It's unheard of. If a dictator said it, people would be like, okay, wait, are you in charge or are the drug companies in charge? Like, no, like I've never heard of a dictator doing it. I've never heard of a democracy doing it. Every other democracy negotiates drug prices on behalf of their taxpayers. But we have perfected corruption in America. So our government officials have surrendered to the drug companies because they give campaign contributions. And I want you to be aware, this is not partisan. The Republicans are totally bought off by the drug companies, but so are the Democrats. Now, not Katie Porter, not progressives, not just Democrats, because they don't take corporate PAC money. So they're clean and uncorrupted. At this point, honestly, they're a tiny group. They're about a dozen people. They're about to get larger because a lot more Just Democrats won in this election cycle. But the rest of the Democratic Party take tons and tons of drug company money. Barack Obama ran ads saying that he was going to stop that practice started under Bush. He didn't. That was not remotely true. He did the same exact thing as the Republicans. Trump said he was going to stop it. He didn't. He did the same exact thing as Obama and Bush. They all give into the corruption, except for a few brave folks like Katie Porter. And what's great about her is she's courageous and incredibly effective. When she does this dressing down, he has no answer. And anyone who sees it goes, and I can't imagine even Republicans disagree. They go, yeah, that guy ripped us off and charged us more than we should have paid for life-saving medicine so that he could take home a giant bonus. And our government officials let him.
I want to go to one more video of Katie Porter questioning him.
Mr. Ellis, do you know how much you personally received in bonuses over 2 years, the last 2 years, just because Celgene raised the price of this one drug, Revlimid?
I receive very generous compensation, but I don't know the exact number that you're referring to.
In fact, you personally received $500,000 personally just by tripling the price of Revlimid. So to recap here, the drug didn't get any better. The cancer patients didn't get any better. You just got better at making money. You just refined your skills at price gouging. And to be clear, the taxpayers spent $3.3 billion on Revlimid.
That was so delicious. It's just so delicious to watch that. The look on his face, his inability to answer any of these questions. It's awesome. And to be fair, Katie Porter wasn't the only progressive in this hearing who asked tough questions. There were also some wonderful moments by Rashida Tlaib and also by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So you're right, Cenk. It's a small group, but it's a fierce group, and hopefully we can expand progressive representation in Congress.
Honestly, I don't know that Republican voters would even disagree with a word she said. Because Fox News and Trump have done no propaganda on this because they just largely ignore it because Nancy Pelosi's on their side, so they don't have to bother fighting it. So if an average voter, no matter what your party sees that, goes, yeah, okay, maybe I could live with like uber capitalism and free markets, whatever I want to say. But wait a minute, why do they charge so much less in the UK and France and Canada and everywhere else? They're specifically ripping us off, obviously because of corruption. So look, I want to go to our viewers, our members, actually, tyt.com/join to get your comments read and get all of our coverage. The Quantum Mechanic said, I love watching Katie Porter work. If you're being questioned by her, you better have done your homework. Honestly, though, I don't think it's even going to help you because she's right on the facts and she's going to crush you. Cray Cray Souffle wrote in, don't you just love how Katie Porter makes corporate and political hacks feel like uber dunce caps? We're so blessed to have her in Congress. Yes, I do love it. It's cathartic and it's true. And I hope to God one day it has an effect. Lastly, Jorge the Frog writes in, play our cards right and we could be talking Senator Khanna and Senator Porter in less than 4 years. I actually think you're thinking too small. I think these folks are amazing and they can go higher and higher. We need our stars to rise up as quickly as possible. Look, unfortunately, MSNBC and CNN gives coverage to all the corporate Democrats. We need to feature progressive Democrats a lot more because they're saying amazing things and they're uncorrupted.
Well, let's move on to an update on what happened to the Los Angeles sheriff's deputies and the suspect who ambushed and shot them. So a few weeks ago, there was an awful ambush attack on 2 Los Angeles sheriff deputies in Los Angeles. They were in a patrol vehicle when an individual approached the car and shot both of them in the head. Miraculously, both of them have survived and are recovering at home, and a suspect has finally been arrested. Now, there were a lot of people speculating about who the suspect was or what motivated this attack, but it appears to just be a criminal, and authorities haven't said anything specific about a motive. The suspect is a 36-year-old by the name of Deontay Lee Murray, who had actually previously committed a crime and was arrested and charged with connection to a carjacking in Linwood, California. Now, the LA Sheriff Alex Villanueva said in a press conference that this cowardly ambush was followed by bystanders celebrating and cheering that the deputies had been shot, and that followed at the hospital. Let me also be clear about something. There were a few people doing that, but it was not a crowd. It was like 4 or 5 people. What they were doing was disgusting, but that was in no way representative of any type of movement or any way connected to the protesters. If you watch the videos, it's 4 or 5 people being unbelievably ridiculous. And so to focus on that, I think, is irresponsible, especially given the fact that the suspect appears to have no connection to Black Lives Matter. Anyway, Villanueva continues to say the quiet sanctity of the hospital, with protesters cheering and chanting for the deputies to die. These acts and that day, I will not forget it. And it represents the worst in humanity, and it shocked the whole nation. And that evening, I said, we will find this man, and I can report today we have found our suspect. So how did they find him? Well, the suspect had done a carjacking prior to the ambush attack against the 2 sheriff deputies. Through surveillance video, they were able to identify that vehicle. Luckily, he had already been arrested for that carjacking, and so they were able to get him not only for the carjacking, but also they tied that vehicle to the previous carjacking and were able to also get him on charges of what he allegedly did to these 2 sheriff deputies. Kurt Wegener, who is heading the investigation, said this about a possible motive. Sheriff's Homicide Bureau Captain Kent Wegener, who detailed the investigation, did not suggest a specific motive for the attack other than the fact that he obviously hates policemen and he wants them dead. Cenk.
Okay, so why did the sheriff bother mentioning the 4 rando protesters at the hospital?
We know. Okay,
I'll tell you why. It's because when the shooting first happened, he came out and demagogued and said, "Oh my God, this is at the hands of the people who were leading protests against police," and he blamed a huge amount of people, including LeBron James, for the shooting of the policeman. So now it turns out, oops, the shooting had nothing to do with protesters or Black Lives Matter or Antifa or George Floyd or anything else. This guy has a giant criminal track record, guns and crimes left and right, wild, out of control guy. By the way, I'm thrilled that they caught him. He not only because of justice, those are 2 human beings that he shot. It's an outrage. But he was also a maniac, totally out of control, loaded up with weapons. And so I'm glad he's off the street, and I'm glad they did their job well in this case in catching him. But has no political connection whatsoever. So in order to not be embarrassed after calling out people like LeBron James, the sheriff comes out and is like, "Oh yeah, I mean, so the guy's like a random criminal. But anyways, remember the 3 or 4 guys that showed up at the hospital? Okay, don't blame me. Just do your job. Just do your job and take credit for catching the guy, which is a great thing. and don't bother bringing back politics into it because you're embarrassed that you were totally wrong.
Well, I mean, look, in the state of California, there have been attacks on police that are politically motivated, but they're politically motivated by right-wing extremists like the Boogaloo Boys. Just this past summer, there was an ambush on cops in Northern California committed by Boogaloo Boys. And so we keep seeing these instances of right-wing individuals carrying out these acts of violence against law enforcement, but we never, have any type of national reckoning about it. We don't have 24/7 media coverage on it. It gets covered by local news sources for maybe half a day, and then everyone moves on. And so when we keep hearing the demagoguing about Black Lives Matter or allegedly these leftist groups who are carrying out acts of terror in this country, just know what the reality is and what the truth is. The police have been targeted violently by specific individuals who have right-wing ideologies.
Yeah, and by the way, Proud Boys who are apparently standing by, according to Donald Trump, ready to do violence after the election, who would they do violence against? Well, if Trump says, well, okay, I lost, but I don't want to lose, I'm not going to recognize the votes, Proud Boys, remember how I told you to stand by? Now go and do violence so that we can just keep this government by force. Well, they wouldn't be doing it to the left. At that point, the left isn't what's relevant. What's relevant is that Donald Trump has lost the election. Hence, the rest of the government apparatus would say, sir, you've got to leave the building. So at that point, whether it's Boogaloos, Proud Boys, or any other far right-wing militia, they would be attacking cops and the military. And these are the guys who pretended to be offended because Colin Kaepernick took a knee. Meanwhile, they're currently plotting how to potentially kill police and military officers.
Well, speaking of Trump, when we come back from the break, we have an update on the type of campaigning he's relying on to drum up his base, and it has to do with attacking Ilhan Omar. So we have that story and more for you when we return.
We are onto something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate PAC money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're going to fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free health care for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single-payer health care, debt-free college, and we are going to get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're going to do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny. Absolutely not.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Guys, not a big deal, but you're about to save the planet. So here's how it works. We're planting 10 trees for everyone who signs up at aspiration.com/TYT. Aspiration and TYT are doing this together. Do you have any idea what 10 trees do? Hold on, let me explain. First of all, one tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. I plant 10 trees, or you plant 10 trees by going to aspiration.com/TYT. That's 40 people. You're giving oxygen to 40 people. What are you going to argue with that? You can't argue with that. But if you do, during 1 year, a mature tree will absorb more than 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen in exchange. We capture the carbon dioxide, release the oxygen. Aspiration.com/TYT. You save money and you save the planet. What else do you want to do? Come on, aspiration.com/TYT. All right, not only that, you can plant a tree with every purchase once you're in Aspiration and you have an account. There's no way this is going to get better. Oh my God, no deposits used for oil drills or pipelines. Oh my God, up to 10% cash back for socially conscious shopping. Hello. With Aspiration Spend and Save, you get the world's first cashback account that lets you track the impact of your spending, all managed through one intuitive app. Would a hero sign up for Aspiration through aspiration.com/TYT? I guess.
So this is what democracy looks like.
When I think back to the debates in 2016, this was a very different party that was debating.
First time in my lifetime that I've actually had progressives represent us.
Bernie Sanders has changed the arithmetic.
This whole debate tonight was shaped by progressives.
She came with receipts. That was her strongest moment by far.
This is going to be one of the best primaries we've ever seen.
This is what we've been saying would happen, and now it's playing out on the debate stage.
A real exchange of ideas. It's going to be a doozy.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, all of your comments. So let's go to our members first. Mishi58 writes, and my father was on Revlimid for a few years. I'm in Canada. Monthly drug cost was $850. Across the border in Detroit, the same monthly dose was $8,500. That's insane. It's a couple of mile difference. The only difference is in Canada, they don't have legalized bribery. Here, we have legalized bribery. It's just wolf-pack.com/go. I mean, you've got to get involved. If you don't, we're never going to win with these corrupt politicians. We got to get an amendment. Obviously, Supreme Court's gone. Okay, folks who just signed up on YouTube on YouTube membership: Rohit Singh 83, Sean Cook, Julio Bracero Rodriguez MD, Christina Vladi, Tim Thompson, Adam L, and April Chopson. Hit the join button below to become a member. Love you guys. You make this show possible. YouTube Super Chat. Ray Raleigh says, why are we not including Katie Porter in the squad? She was a freshman at the same time. There's a literal answer to that. The squad were all Justice Democrats. Unfortunately, Katie wasn't. She should be, but she wasn't. So that's why this squad is who they are. But Katie Porter's just as good as any of them. She's wonderful. Lonely Soul says, once Katie Porter pulls her out her board, you're getting schooled. That's totally true. The minute she grabs for the board, I'm like, yes. Okay. And new subs on Twitch are Basho100, Deltana788, Papa Chango, and Lieutenant Mac McGee and Otto Naomi gifted subs. We love you for doing that. Thank you. I got Between Me and Uyghur with Ravi Patel tonight. He's got a new HBO Max show, The Pursuit of Happiness. Check that out, twitch.tv/TYT. And thank you to everybody giving bits too. You guys are wonderful. Last thing is, guys, we got a little bit more money at tyt.com/go. It's what allows us to remain strong, keep all of our employees, and do the work that you see. 9,615. We'd love to see 10,000 by the end of the show. tyt.com/go. Thank you, guys. Anna.
All right. Well, we have a little bit of breaking news for you guys. Conservative operatives Jacob Wall and Jack Berkman have been charged on a number of election crimes, which I'll detail for you in just a minute. These charges were announced by the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who mentioned the slew of charges having to do with robocalls that were organized by these two. The robocalls were targeted toward minority voters, many of whom reside in Michigan, Detroit specifically, and it spread all sorts of disinformation about mail-in ballots, alleging that the mail-in ballots were essentially going to be used against the voters, and it was a violation of their privacy. So the voice on the call attributed to Wall and Berkman and their attempts to trick listeners into not sending in their mail-in ballots, falsely warning that the information would be used to track fugitives, collect on credit card debts, and enforce mandatory vaccines. The calls also told residents to beware of vote by mail. So they were doing everything they can to suppress the vote and to scare voters away from voting by mail. And so the charges, they're both facing 4 felony counts and 24 years in prison. That's the maximum sentence. And it's for violating election laws in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so my first reaction to this is finally, I mean, we have asked about on half a dozen wildly illegal schemes these two have done. Why haven't they been arrested yet? I mean, are there any laws that apply to the right wing at all? Will they ever be enforced? So finally, somebody said, enough is enough. They're apparently doing this scheme not just in Michigan, but across the country. About 85,000 calls have gone out. In this case, they say all the calls, according to the Daily Beast, they said were made to residents in, quote, urban areas with significant minority populations, according to the Michigan Attorney General. Now, get a load of what these clowns said. So they have all of these false information that Anna told you, including comical things like mandatory vaccines, but mainly scaring people about credit card debt. And look at their assumptions about minorities, by the way, and you're going to get arrested, etc. But my favorite line was this one: "Don't be BS'd into giving your private information to the man." Oh God, you guys are embarrassing, man. I mean, because these idiots think, oh, that's how black people talk. Oh, don't do it, man. Ay. And how did they get caught? That clown Berkman. He had the robocalls attached to his personal cell phone number. They're
I know,
so
it's amazing.
dumb. They're the dumbest people in the world.
They really are. It's amazing how dumb they are. So Berkman denied being behind the robocall, claiming it was suspicious that it was connected to his personal cell phone number. And he said no one in their right mind would put their own cell on a robocall. No, but you guys would. I mean, they've gotten caught with so many ridiculous stunts, including attempting to incriminate various people like Comey, for instance, by offering to pay women to drum up fake allegations of sexual misconduct against them. The women who were contacted by them spoke to the press, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And I don't remember the exact context in which Jacob Wall was pretending to be a security guard by using Apple AirPods, but it was hilarious. I mean, he's a joke. He's a clown, and he's been in trouble over and over again for these types of stunts.
Anna, let me just clarify. It wasn't what Wall was speaking. He got like this 4-foot dude to stand behind him with an iPod piece and pretending to be like almost like Secret Service, right? And it was just one of the funniest sights we've ever seen. And then remember, like Berkman saying, like, who would attach their own number to a robocall, thereby making it easy to get caught? In one of their first schemes, they got caught because they had set up a dummy corporation, which is a fitting title in this case, and it got tracked back to Jacob Wall's mom's house. These are the world's worst criminals. By the way, this is serious stuff. You're doing illegal voter suppression. I know we're used to the Republican Party doing it on a mass scale, but this form of it is not legal. And it carries a 24-year maximum sentence. So I don't see any reason why the authorities should let up on these guys at all. After all the law breaking that they have done, can we finally get some justice?
Well, one more story for you before we have to wrap up the first hour. So a day after Donald Trump absolutely refused to condemn white supremacy in America, he appeared at a campaign stop in Minnesota, at the Duluth airport specifically, where he hurled all sorts of typical xenophobic rants against people of color, but in particular, Somali refugees. And that's relevant because Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is from Minnesota, is a Somalian refugee. And so let's hear what he has to say in his disgusting rant during his rally.
Another massive issue for Minnesota is the election of Joe Biden's plan to inundate your state with a historic flood of refugees. And what about Omar, where she gets caught harvesting? What the hell is going on? I hope your U.S. attorney is involved. What is going on with Omar? I've been reading these reports for 2 years about how corrupt and crooked she is. Let's get with it. Let's get with it. I mean, frankly, harvesting's terrible, but it's the least of the things that she has done. How the hell? Then she tells us how to run our country. Can you believe it?
So what he's referring to there was a video put out by Project Veritas, which is not to ever be taken seriously by rational people. Project Veritas is known to spread disinformation campaigns. They have heavily doctored and edited videos to make it appear as though some sort of crime is being committed or some sort of illegal act is being committed, when in reality, the truth is further from what they're presenting. And this was a disinformation campaign that was promoted by Tulsi Gabbard, someone who paraded around as some sort of progressive, when in reality, she is in many ways extreme and an extremist in supporting Narendra Modi and his slaughter of Muslims in India. And I don't think it's any surprise that she promoted Project Veritas's disgusting video, which specifically targeted Ilhan Omar, who is a Muslim and a Somalian refugee.
All right. So, look, the worst part of that was when he said, who's she to tell us what to do with our country? What do you mean, our country? She's a United States Congresswoman. What do you mean, our country? See, look, guys, there's really no debate as to whether Donald Trump supports white supremacists. It's Thursday. He refused to denounce them in the debate on Tuesday. He's had all this time. He still won't speak out clearly against white supremacists. But you don't even need that. Look at the way that he talks on a regular basis. Our country means it's for white people. It's not for a Somali immigrant who's now a U.S. citizen, which means she is 100% American, who's now in Congress representing nearly 1 million Americans. Nope. But she's not really American. It's not really her country because she's black, she's Somali, she's Muslim. So the white supremacy is not hidden at all. It's completely plain to the naked eye. But it's not just Donald Trump. Did you hear that crowd? Now, that's what separates TYT from the rest of the media. Mainstream media will go, tut, tut, can you believe that? And then they'll move on. But there'll also be like a subtle thing of like, yeah, but it's Ilhan Omar, right? No, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. So like if he'd said that Joe Biden's not a real American, it's not his country, there'd be a much bigger uproar. Now I get it, they're in the middle of a presidential debate, but if he'd said it, a contest, but if he'd said it about someone other than Ilhan Omar, I think there'd actually be far more outrage. But even if you say, okay, I'll give the media that, at least they pointed it out. They never talk about the crowd. And the reality is that crowd loved that racist talk. So Trump supporters, fans, and voters are at least as guilty as Donald Trump. Part of the reason Donald Trump is doing it is because it works so well with his base. So, you know, if something else worked better, he's a con artist. He doesn't really care. He's just giving back what he's seeing from the crowd so that you'll support him. And what he's seeing from the crowd is deep racism. And he's playing the hits back to them, and that's why they're cheering wildly as he spews that bigotry, plain as day, in front of everybody.
So you're right, and this is really what he relies on. This is the red meat that he relies on for his base. And in Minnesota, Trump isn't doing so well based on polling. So I just want to go to this graph from 538 that shows that Biden does in fact have a lead 48-42 in the state of Minnesota. So that's what Trump is relying on to drum up his base. Postgame is next. Don't miss it. tyt.com/join.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey. Hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
We're gonna do a little thing we like to call Weekly World News. Weekly World News! I cull stories from around the globe, stories that aren't covered on the main show or aren't covered enough, and I turn it into a 5-question quiz for Dave and Steve. All right, do we have our answers? A from Dave and C from Steve, and the correct answer is B, an oil tanker that sank off the coast of China. Okay, we have one answer of B and one answer of C. What is the correct answer? It is, of course, A, an airplane wing walking stunt gone wrong. Okay, we have an answer of A from Dave and C from Steve. The correct answer is B. We have an answer of B and C. What is the correct answer in true Weekly World News tradition? It's A.
Come on.
Taking the bear out for ice cream.
That can't possibly be true. We're terrible today. Just terrible.
When news is breaking and when you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time. When news breaks, when news is breaking and you like. When news is breaking and you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time for Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Jank and Anna, post game for you guys. I want to read 2 member comments. We don't normally do it in the post game, but I really want to answer these questions real quick. Essential on the Brink asks, I'm missing something here. What's the Boogaloo Boys' motivation for attacking cops? Is it playing agents provocateur or something? Yes, the one in Northern California, that's exactly what it was. So you're not missing anything. They wanted to pretend that it was a left-wingers shooting cops. So they shot cops and killed them.
Yeah.
And that actually makes it worse. And it also makes it more frustrating that it's not getting more coverage, right? Because they're like, oh, the left-wing protesters are doing all this violence. Meanwhile, it's actually right-wingers who are doing the violence pretending to be left-wingers. Luckily, the authorities caught them there because they shot cops. So the cops are highly motivated to catch them, and they did. And so,
can I also just say,
because, sorry, Anna, just real quick, also because they really have an anti-government ideology. They think jackbooted thugs don't tread on me. So they're just itching to shoot cops and military folks because they think they're part of the big bad government.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to add the anti-government part. And also it's their hope that by carrying out these acts of violence against cops and trying to frame Black Lives Matter for it, they can basically trigger a race war in the country. That's also part of their goal.
Yeah, 100%. And then one last comment, because it's a slight correction of what we said, and I love that. So Love Hate 01 wrote in, these are our members. I want to start by saying I absolutely love all you guys and everything you're about. That being said, I really feel like you're a bit off the mark when you argue that the Dems were not out there trying to place blame on Mitch blocking their bill. My roommate leaves his TV on CNN 24/7, and every single time there was a Dem rep being interviewed about any subject, they would always bring it back around to the HEROES Act laying on Mitch's desk for however many days, weeks, months it had been since they passed it in the House. Now, they went on to explain that they did back off of that when the Republicans started counterattacking. But honestly, I don't watch that much cable news, and they have trouble getting the message out even when they are on cable, because really the way that it works is that if you're on cable, you reach a certain limited number of people. But if it becomes an issue that everyone else is talking about it, then it spreads out much wider. But Democrats are not good at doing that because they're so timid when they go on television. They barely ever make news, right? But to be fair, I really appreciate that you gave us that perspective. And honestly, you might have a better perspective than we do on that, given the situation you described about CNN unfortunately being on in your house all the time. Thank you for sharing.
Well, I want to respond to that as well. I have CNN on all day long, like literally all day long as I'm producing the show, just in case there is a breaking news story. And I want to make sure we catch it before we go on air, not because I actually rely on the reporting there, but I disagree. I actually haven't seen very many instances of Democrats making a strong case, right? Like just do a comparative analysis based on the types of gimmicks and stunts the right wing will pull in order to get what they want versus what Democrats do. I mean, just the Hillary Benghazi thing. I mean, they would not let it go. And I think that it partially did hurt her when she was running against Trump in 2016. So my point is that they need to be relentless, especially when it comes to representing the best interests and the financial interests of Americans who are really struggling right now. Making a timid case in CNN interviews here or there, I don't think qualifies for what I would like them to do.
All right, I hear you. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so let's talk about poll watchers. Trump has already begun using so-called poll watchers, which, make no mistake about it, are meant to intimidate voters as they show up to the polls. Now, there are certain satellite sites in Philadelphia, for instance, not to do early voting, but those sites are open for individuals who might want to register to vote or maybe want to drop off their ballots. And so the Trump administration is angry that their campaign officials who are showing up to be poll watchers at these sites are being turned away. Now, on Wednesday, at the weekly Philadelphia City Commissioners meeting, which is open for public comment, the Trump campaign's Pennsylvania State Director for Election Day Operations, James Fitzpatrick, requested that the board allow the campaign to immediately appoint poll watchers at early voting centers. Here's what he said during this meeting. Because voting is occurring at these satellite offices, the Trump campaign requests that we immediately be able to appoint poll watchers to observe the voting at these satellite offices. In the alternative, if these are satellite offices of the Board of Elections, we request the right to have our representatives observe the process from a public space within these satellite election offices. So, officers. So what they want to do, and by the way, just to give you more background, we've talked about this before, but in case you missed it, these poll watchers would be basically like armed guards meant to intimidate voters. This country has a history of the Republican Party doing this, and the courts had to intervene and implement a consent decree preventing them from doing it. Well, the consent decree actually expired in 2018, which has paved the way for the Trump campaign to hire these armed off-duty cops, essentially, to serve as their poll watchers. So I have more details on this in just a second, but the law indicates that these satellite sites do not need poll watchers. This is not the same as an in-person voting site. Cenk.
Yeah, so look, there's a nuance here in this story. I think that if it's real polling sites where people going in to vote, not just dropping off their mail-in ballot, I think having someone from each party there to make sure things are not going wrong is not a bad thing. I certainly wouldn't want to leave it up to Republicans and hope and trust that they do the right thing, especially in deeply Republican areas. So, and that is fairly normal. On the other hand, sending in volunteers who are not trained by the party is kind of pointless unless your aim is intimidation, because they don't know what to look for. They're not, they're randos off the street. And if you just have a bunch of goons there, and you know how Republicans are. I mean, they showed up at one polling station in Virginia, and instantly they surround the place and start chanting like crazy. Folks feel intimidated. They had to move them to a separate place, etc. And there is this ugly history of that kind of intimidation, as Anna explained earlier. And so you can't have it that way. And these are not polling stations. These are places where you're just going to, it's like going to a mailbox to drop off your mail-in vote. So are we going to, now it would be absurd to put poll watchers at every mailbox, right? Or post office. But the reason they're doing it is because they can't intimidate a mailbox, but they can intimidate human beings going in to drop off their mail-in ballot. And that's the underlying reason here. No question about it.
Right. And one of the frustrating moments from the debate was when Donald Trump, offered his talking points about how wonderful poll watchers are without anyone challenging him on what the reality is of these poll watchers, what the actual intentions are of the Trump campaign to use these people at in-person voting locations. They make it appear as though they're doing it to prevent voter fraud, something that we have absolutely no evidence of happening on a widespread scale. But this was the moment from the debate that drove me crazy. There was no response from either Chris Wallace or Joe Biden on the absolute lies Trump told in what you're about to hear.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. The other thing,
President Trump,
it's a rigged election.
You're going to be able to continue. You go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things.
Because bad things happen in Philadelphia. No, you want bad things to happen. He wants to suppress people from voting. That's what this is really about. And just to really reinforce the point that I'm trying to make about the lack of voter fraud. Republicans have been, basically taking these cases to the courts and hoping that federal judges will vote in their favor when it comes to restricting mail-in voting. And I'm just going to give you a taste of a ruling handed down by one judge. But I want to be clear that we've seen similar rulings by judges who have been appointed by both parties, both Democrats and Republicans, who are just flat out rejecting what Republicans are claiming here. So, for instance, one federal judge said the following. In a 46-page order, Judge Dana L. Christensen of the U.S. District Court in Montana refused the campaign's request for an injunction aimed at stopping Governor Stephen Bullock from allowing all eligible voters to cast mail-in ballots. Christensen, an appointee of President Barack Obama, found the plaintiff's stated reason for seeking the injunction basically that the risk to voter fraud had no basis in reality. Here's his exact wording. He said, in many respects, this case requires the court to separate fact from fiction. Central to some of the plaintiff's claims is the contention that the upcoming election, both nationally and in Montana, will fall prey to widespread voter fraud. The evidence suggests, however, that this allegation, specifically in Montana, is a fiction. And then also just keep in mind, when pressed during the hearing in the matter, the plaintiffs were compelled to concede that they cannot point to a single instance of voter fraud in Montana in any election during the last 20 years. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay, all right. So
spreading disinformation for the right wing. Disgusting.
So look, I love that Montana case because the judge is like, no, we're in court. Great. So you say voter fraud is rampant. It's a giant problem. Okay, great. So hand in your evidence. They're like, we don't have any. You say, what do you mean you don't have any? I mean, you brought the case. The whole point is you have all these instances of voter fraud. So just name one. It's okay. Just name one case of voter fraud in Montana. Forget the last election, last 20 years. We don't have a single case. She's like, what are you doing here? Why did you bother to file this case? It's crazy. I mean, look, you can go fact-free on Fox News. You can go fact-free on Twitter. You can't go fact-free in a court because a judge asks you for the facts, and if you don't have them, then you lose in humiliating fashion. Likely, Trump is making them do these lawsuits. They're probably like, but what do we say? When we get into court, what do we say? There is no voter fraud. They're like, he's like, just make something up. You'll win on Twitter. Don't worry. It's not how court cases work. So, and then on speaking of making stuff up, Anna played you that clip about how he's like, oh, it's crazy what's happening. I mean, earlier in the debate, he made up a thing about how we're planting 1 billion trees. Earlier than that, he had claimed that they were going to plant 1 trillion trees. Well, we're making things up. Why? Who cares? Trillion, billion. They're not planting any trees. He's a pathological liar. So on the case of voter fraud and the mail-in ballots, etc., he said, oh, they're dumping them in the river. It's terrible what's happening in Philadelphia. They're dumping them in the river. So today in the press conference, Kayleigh McEnany got asked, where's the river? So if they're dumping all these ballots in the river, we're reporters. In fact, the person who asked it is John Decker. He works for Fox News Radio, Fox News. They're like, where's the river? We got to go to the river. Where is it? And she's like, well, I don't know about a specific river. It might have been a ditch. But anyway, let's keep going. And he's like, no, let's not keep going. It's okay if it's a ditch. Just say he misspoke. It's a ditch. Let's figure out where the ditch is. Because if they're really dumping ballots, that's a massive issue. So, and she had nothing. Okay, turns out there was 3 buckets of mail missing in Pennsylvania that they did find somewhere, right? Does that happen? I guess it happens. Do I want them to investigate that? Hell yes. God knows what Republicans might be doing. And if it turns out it's a Democrat, they should be arrested, right? It might, but likely it has nothing to do with any of them. It was a whole bunch of mail and they found a couple of ballots in there. That's not the best way to do anything. But just answer the question. But she can't because she doesn't want to say even the simple thing of the president misspoke because he'll be furious with her. Because it's got to be a river if he said it was a river. So on Twitter today, #where's the river was trending.
That's amazing. That's amazing. These guys, I mean, They know how unpopular their views are. They know that the American people, the majority of American people are against them, and they have to rely on cheating. And it's so frustrating to see that in some instances it's working. But we got to fight back.
Yeah, by the way, Decker also asked a really good question. He's like, who's they? Because the president said they're throwing them in the river. One, where's the river? Two, who's they? She wouldn't answer either question.
Amazing. It's amazing. All right. We're kind of running short on time, and I really want to do at least 2 fun stories since everything's been very serious. You guys cool with me moving on to Ted Cruz?
Yeah, let's do it and see if we have time.
All right. So back in 2016, Donald Trump called Ted Cruz's wife ugly. And you would think that a man would have at least a little dignity and shun Trump forever after that, but that's not what happened. Ted Cruz later ended up phone banking for Donald Trump and even endorsed him. And so just to remind you guys of what Trump had tweeted about Ted Cruz's wife, here's the offensive tweet, I should say, where he's comparing Ted Cruz's wife, who, by the way, is not unattractive. That's my opinion. But he's comparing Ted Cruz's wife to Melania Trump. And then following that, Ted Cruz did phone bank for Donald Trump and was basically cuck of the nation. Now, we've always wanted someone to call him out on that to his face. And lucky for you guys, last night, Chris Cuomo delivered. Let's watch.
Governors have taken the lead and have had much greater success. Texas' record on every level is much better than New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts.
That's not true. Look at New York's numbers. Look at the rate every day of testing. My brother puts it out every day. They were the hub of where people were coming. You guys want to celebrate China. You let in 40,000 people. It had already moved to Europe.
So Chris,
you let in tens of thousands of people. They went to the hubs. That's why we got so sick here. Does it trouble you at all that New York and New Jersey had the highest death rates in the country? Does that make you pause and say, gosh? It all troubles me, Ted. And to watch guys like you stand by and stroke your beard like a wise man instead of telling the president to get on it when you have power.
How about tell your brother to get on it?
My brother will stand for his own record. Why don't you talk to the president the way you talk to my brother, Ted? You afraid of him? You think he'll smack you down at home?
Oh,
is that
yeah,
what it is? Like he shut you up in the primary?
You guys
not
are really
Cuomo's.
tough.
I'm talking about the president. My brother's not the president. I'm talking about the president, the one who called you a liar, the one who said your wife was ugly. That guy, you know, the guy now who you won't say anything about.
I recognize that you actually wonder why you don't have a lot of Republicans that want to come on your show.
I have more than any other show.
I got goosebumps. I got real excited watching that. Is that wrong? There's
I'd
something.
say, look.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's part of why we like Cuomo better than the other guys, right? And he's right. He does have a lot of Republicans on, and at least during the primaries, he had progressives on too, which is more than any other cable show. And so, but it doesn't mean you have to be soft with them. The question that he asked Ted Cruz is one that should have been asked a million times by a million anchors. The guy called your wife ugly and your dad a murderer. You're phone banking for him. Isn't that strange? It's actually the easiest, most obvious question. But you know why they don't ask it? Because of exactly what Ted Cruz said right afterwards. You wonder why you don't have Republicans on your show. In other words, if you dare challenge us, even with obvious questions, we'll never come on your show. We'll cut off your access. So usually they're implicit with their threat, but you saw Ted Cruz's face change when Cuomo brought up that point. Before he had that smug face like, oh yeah, we're jousting, we're having fun. I'm obfuscating every point. Nobody can tell. Everybody will call it a tie. What? When he made the wife point, his face changed. And then he's like, oh yeah, you wonder why you never have Republicans on. That's it. We're going to take away your precious access. Okay, I get it. I have choice words for him. I don't know if I can say them on air. Well, actually, Trump already said it, and then he became his bitch. Oops, there you go.
There's something about Cuomo, and I mean, I'm sure that we have disagreements on policy and politics, whatever, putting all of that aside and simply honing in on his, for lack of a better word, I guess, temper. I really relate to that. Like the way he handled that is exactly how I would want to handle it, right? Like, it's not just the fact that he called Ted Cruz out for supporting Trump and refusing to stand up to him after he said all these incredibly insulting things about Ted Cruz's family members. It's also this unwillingness, like the fact that he called him out on his unwillingness to ever speak up or ever cross Donald Trump. Like, what you're afraid of him? You're afraid of him? Like, yeah, they are. They're afraid of them and afraid of Trump. And I love that it was just clearly stated in this exchange in the way that I think it needs to be stated, not like, oh, let me do a little nudge here, maybe a little poke there. No, he's like, what, you're afraid of him? Why don't you call him out? Why don't you hold him accountable for his failures? And it's not just about Ted Cruz. It's about every prominent Republican in the Republican Party who just stands by and allows Donald Trump to do whatever he wants, even if it goes against what their alleged principles have been for decades now. I mean, on every issue, Donald Trump makes a mockery of what Republicans claim they stood for. And they just stand back and they allow it to happen because they're afraid. They're totally afraid of Trump. That's been the one, I guess, highlight of Trump's administration. He didn't just cuck Ted Cruz. He's cucked all of them.
Yeah, I mean, what he did to Lindsey Graham and how Lindsey Graham then bowed his head and started kissing Donald Trump's boots. Oh, it was so wonderfully pathetic. Maybe we should be running some, Rebellion PAC should be running some ads in South Carolina. That little, anyway. So, but one more thing about Ted Cruz's cowardice. Look, guys, think about it. I mean, I know me. I'd rather not win any political office. I'd rather not than to kiss the ass of a guy who called my dad a murderer, who made that up and smeared my dad like that. I love my dad, man. There's no amount of power or money or fame or anything else that would get me to betray my family like that. And then he calls your wife ugly. And at the time, he's like, Donald Trump, I won't stand for it. I will get you. Blah, 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 blah. And then next thing you know, oh, please help elect Donald Trump. Okay. Oh, God. Oh, that's why when he was running as Beto O'Rourke, we called that race Beto versus Beta. He's really, they're like the weakest. There he is. Oh, I love that picture. And he's got this fur. Like, oh, please vote for Trump. Oh. He's almost like crying in that picture. So these guys who love to bully other people, at the slightest challenge, they back down because internally, they're the biggest cowards in the world. The only reason Ted Cruz even went on Cuomo's show is because he's trying to sell a book. And Cuomo gave him 20 minutes, and he let him talk about the book at the end. He gave him a whole couple of minutes to just do a one big ad for the book and said, that's why he's on there. But normally he hides. He's like, right? And so when he's not on air, he'll say, oh, Fredo this and that, the other thing. And then he goes on air and he gets his ass kicked. By the way, Ted, you're trying to sell a book. Come on, the Young Turks. We got 500 million views a month. I mean, maybe you'll sell a lot of books. A lot of right-wingers watch us. Remember the 2016 election? Come and see, right? He won't come on. No way. It's inconceivable that Ted Cruz could take any of us on. Inconceivable. He will fold like a lawn chair.
Yep. All right. Speaking of folding like lawn chairs and cowardice, let's move on to Dave Rubin and what he's having a temper tantrum about lately. So Dave Rubin has decided to take what decidedly is the most boring, non-political book in existence and politicize it to become something about censorship? I don't know. Why don't we watch this exchange on Fox and Friends and see what he has to say about the AP style book? Watch.
The AP style book recently has they tweeted out on Tuesday saying to use care when you're using the word riot. Opt for a milder word, maybe like unrest. They said that riot can have a negative racial connotation. And we remember a while back they said don't use illegal immigrant, use undocumented. What do you think about this recent advice?
The alien.
Well, I want to get this stylistically right. It's completely bananas. I mean, this is complete lunacy. I actually have the AP style book behind me here in my office as well. And I don't consider myself a journalist. I tell people what I think for a living. But this literally, and people often don't use the word literally correctly, this is literally George Orwell's 1984 newspeak, that we will change the meaning of words so that no one will ever be able to have a sensible conversation with anyone. We know what riots are. When you turn on the TV and you see some of the things I talked about earlier with Molotov cocktails and small businesses burning down and people assaulting people in their cars and blocking traffic and all of those things, those are riots. Why are they trying to change words? And they're trying to change words so that you can't calibrate. You won't be able to have a conversation with your neighbor because your language won't even be the same. And the more they can cut us off from each other, and this is by design, changing words, it starts with changing words, and next thing you know, you can't talk to other people, and you're paranoid and the rest of it, and it's dangerous. This is really weird. These are the same people, by the way, who will tell you that violence is not violence, but somehow words are violence. It's all very confusing.
Dave, by the way, when you look up riot in my book that was published in 1998, the word's not even in the book.
Okay, so look, this is a small point. Of course, I want to discuss like the nonsense that was just spewed in that ridiculous exchange. But Dave Rubin, there's no way in the world he has an AP style book. Look, I'm going to keep it real. I have an AP style book, right? But I have an AP style book specifically because I teach journalism and I need to have it in order to do my job. If you're not writing for a print news source or platform, why would you randomly have the AP style book? The AP style book is specifically for print journalists who and for newsrooms to streamline the way their reporters write their reports. And what it also does, which is incredibly helpful, is it helps people understand the difference between words so you don't use words improperly. So for instance, here's an example. There is a difference between a burglary and a robbery. And so the AP style guide helps to clarify that for reporters in case they might be confused. You can't use those two words interchangeably because a burglary occurs when no one is in the home and someone, breaks in and steals something. Robbery occurs when an individual, a victim, is confronted with a weapon or whatever by the perpetrator and is robbed of whatever they have. If it's money, their purse, you get what I'm saying. So that's what the AP style guide is. That's what the AP style book is. And for them to turn this into some crazy politicized thing because it's simply clarifying the difference between a riot and a protest is ridiculous. It's literally 1984. No, it's not. And I don't know how much longer he can go on with this censorship grift, especially when half of his career is based on trying to censor people he disagrees with. But it's amazing that he gets any airtime. He just consistently sounds like an idiot.
So, first of all, I'm pretty sure it's not literally 1984. I don't need the AP style guide to tell me that. Second of all, when you said it's the most boring book, I thought you were talking about Dave Rubin's book. Now,
that was the most comical book, and you should read the reviews of it because it's amazing. Go ahead.
So now to the substance of this story. First of all, should you clarify between riots and protests? Of course! Are some things just protests without any riots? Yes. Are some things riots? Yes. It doesn't mean that riots don't exist. It just means, hey, if you have peaceful protesters that get together and there's no looting and nobody burns anything, don't call that a riot. If there is an actual riot and windows got broken or things are burned down, call that a riot. They're like, can you believe they're changing the meaning of the words? No, they're not. They're just telling you what the two different words are. So, but of course, why do they want to say that? Well, the rest of the media is biased. It's only us that's awesome. And, of course, they're black people and left-wingers. They're all rioters. Who's changing the meaning of words? Ironically, it's literally them in this particular case. But that's not unusual. remember, everything that you hear from the right wing is projection. So you change the meaning of words. They say, oh, what is Dave Rubin? Well, I was about to say, what's he famous for? Correct answer, nothing. Second answer, for being part of the Young Turks and then turning into a conservative. Third answer, though, is, oh, I'm for freedom of speech, freedom of speech. Are you in favor of those laws that block your speech against Israeli policy? Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to speak against Israel, but I'm for freedom of speech. Are you in favor of the laws that say it's okay to run over protesters if they're left wing? Yeah, I mean, I love those laws, but I mean, I'm for freedom of speech. Oh, it seems like you're kind of changing the meaning of that phrase. It's kind of funny how that works, but that's not all. You guys don't know all this. Collateral damage. That used to be innocent civilians who were killed. Now it's just collateral damage. It's just a little fender bender, right? These are all Republican speak. It used to be estate tax for the estates of multimillionaires. Then they changed it to death tax because estate tax sounded like, yeah, they don't really need all that money. It'd be great if they kept a lot of it for their kids, but then we took tax some so that we could give other kids opportunity, like a college education. Oh, death tax sounds bad. And then finally, I mean, there's 1,000 of these examples. They're all done by Republicans. Torture isn't torture. It's enhanced interrogation. So the right wing invented doublespeak and changing the meaning of words to make them sound like something they're not. And here's Fox News pretending that they're shocked and chagrined by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh, God, he's dumb. Anyway, so that's what we've got for you guys today. Good show.
All right, agreed.
Do you want me to? Oh, BMU is next, but like before you give the details of that, Cenk, like, do you want me to wrap up the post game because I like awkwardly wait for you to do it?
So in the post game, yeah, in the post game we have inside baseball, right? So we don't mind having these conversations in front of you. You guys are all family. Anyways, yeah. So in this case, BMU is coming up. That's between me and Uyghur. When I say that, it always feels funny because I'm like, wait, am I between myself? Anyways, tonight, Ravi Patel is on. He's in a whole bunch of hit movies, including the new Wonder Woman that's coming out. But he's got his own HBO Max show now, The Pursuit of Happiness. It's hilarious. It's got his parents, it's got his wife and kids in it, but he goes to different countries. And actually, one of the things that he exposes rando racism in Denmark against refugees and immigrants. So, I mean, it's not random, as you'll see, but it's going to be a great conversation. Check that out. It's 8 o'clock Eastern, twitch.tv/TYT. And then that's it. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Speaking of awkward. All right, love you guys. See you then.